There is a very specific kind of silence that happens at a family reunion, right after someone glances at the group photo and quietly asks, "Wait, where's your brother?" Nobody answers right away. Someone changes the subject. Someone else suddenly finds their drink extremely interesting. And the person who asked already knows, from that silence alone, that the missing brother is not missing by accident. Now, I bring this up not because I have any particular insight into anyone's family gatherings, but because something almost identical just happened on national television, except the family was four former presidents of the United States, and the brother who wasn't in the photo is currently living in the White House. So, good evening or good afternoon, or whatever time zone has decided to have you today. Let's not waste the pleasantries because this one actually matters, and I'd rather get into it than get through the formalities. America turns 250 years old this summer, and to mark it, the History Channel put together something called History Talks, a private event in Philadelphia where Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden each sat down, one by one, with Jenna Bush Hager, who happens to be George W. Bush's daughter, which is its own small irony we'll get to, and each of them delivered a version of the same message. America has been through rough patches before. Democracy is self-correcting. Be a citizen and not a spectator. That sort of thing. Tasteful, bipartisan, exactly the kind of programming a media company puts together when it wants credit for unity, without the risk of an actual argument. And it would have stayed exactly that, a nice, forgettable, feel-good clip package, except for one detail that took approximately 4 hours to become the entire story. Donald Trump was not there. Now, to be fair to the History Channel, and I try to be fair even when it's inconvenient, there is a genuinely reasonable explanation for this. History Talks has, of course, always been built around former presidents reflecting on their legacies, and Trump is, at the moment, extremely still employed. You cannot really ask a sitting president to reminisce wistfully about his legacy while he is in the middle of extending it. Jenna Bush Hager said as much, and added that the History Channel is working with Trump separately on his own America 250 project to be announced later. All fairly sensible. None of it stopped what happened next, which was that clips of four presidents talking about unity and self-correction went online, and within about a day, a significant portion of the internet had decided that the real story here was who wasn't included. "He's a living former president too, and currently serving again," one commenter wrote, apparently under the impression that this was a technicality nobody in a television production meeting had considered. Another called it an intentional snub. And I want to sit with that phrase for a second, because it tells you something that has nothing to do with television scheduling. An intentional snub is not a complaint about a guest list. It's a complaint about being reminded once again that the country cannot produce a single unifying cultural moment anymore without somebody translating it almost instantly into a scoreboard. Four men who occupied the same office across 3 decades of very different politics managed to say more or less the same thing about hope and citizenship and rough patches. And that wasn't received as reassuring. It was received by a meaningful slice of the audience as evidence of a conspiracy, which, when you actually think about it, is a fairly remarkable thing to have happened to a segment that was, by any reasonable measure, extremely boring. Now, here's the part I think is actually worth your time, because the snub itself is not the interesting story. The interesting story is why a scheduling decision that makes complete institutional sense could detonate this fast. And the honest answer is that Trump's relationship with the fraternity of former presidents has never been a normal one. And I don't think that's a controversial statement so much as a documented one. He skipped Joe Biden's inauguration in 2021, the first outgoing president to do that in over 100 years. He has spent years describing his predecessors in terms that are not typically found in presidential libraries. And so, when an event comes along that is explicitly built around the camaraderie of that club, Bush actually used that word, camaraderie, describing what it's like being part of what he called the ex-president club. The absence of Trump doesn't read as neutral. It reads as continuity. It reads as exactly what everyone already expected, which is, of course, precisely why it became a story instead of a footnote. You cannot accidentally snub someone into a narrative that was already fully written before the cameras rolled. And here's where I'll admit something, because pretending to be certain about intent is usually where analysis quietly turns into propaganda. I don't know whether the production genuinely never considered including Trump, or whether someone in a meeting said the quiet part out loud and decided a sitting president reflecting on his legacy midterm was simply a bad television format. Full stop. Both are plausible. Both, frankly, land you in the same place. Because the consequence isn't really about one broadcast. The consequence is what this keeps doing to the idea of the presidency as something bigger than whoever currently holds it. Every one of those four men, on camera, said some version of, "We're not so divided. This country heals itself. Vote if you don't like it." That is, historically, the entire function of a retiring president. You hand over the office, you say something dignified about the system being larger than any one administration. And everyone nods and moves on with their lives. It's a ritual. It's supposed to be boring. What's changed is that half the country now hears the system is larger than any one man and translates it instantly as an attack on the specific man currently running it. That's not a media bias story, and it's not really a Trump story either, if I'm honest, though it is now impossible to talk about it without him. That's a story about what happens when a country loses its last few shared rituals, the ones that used to be safely above the daily argument, and finds that literally nothing is above the argument anymore. Not the flag, not the anniversary, not four men in their 70s and 80s talking about hope. And the consequence for America, heading into an actual quarter millennium birthday party, is that there are now going to be two separate America 250 productions, one built around Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Biden, and one, later this year, built around Trump. And I would gently suggest that if a country needs two competing television specials just to agree on its own birthday, the thing being celebrated and the thing being performed have quietly become two different events, which is, in its own way, a kind of achievement. 250 years, and America has finally found a way to argue about its own anniversary party before the cake has even been cut. I'm Marcus Fenn. This is Borderlines. If you think this channel is worth having around, subscribe now, because the loudest stories are rarely the ones that matter, and the quiet ones, like an empty chair nobody wants to talk about, usually are.